Hello, and welcome to Pathways Through the Prairie, where we interview North Dakota librarians and library staff, state agency leaders, and employees and interesting North Dakotans. I am State Librarian Mary Soucie, and today I'm excited to be joined by Lieutenant Governor Michelle Strinden. Thank you so much for joining us, Lieutenant Governor.
Thank you so much, Mary, for the invitation. I'm so happy to be here with you today.
Oh, I'm very excited. So, Lieutenant Governor, the state library's vision is providing pathways to knowledge and opportunities. What was your pathway into public service?
That's a great question. I been born and raised right here in North Dakota, and I grew up in Bismarck. And during that time, my mother worked for the state. Actually, she worked in the state capitol. She was a Medicaid and eligibility specialist, and she started in Grand Forks County as a secretary with a high school diploma and worked her way all the way up to Medicaid director at one point in the Medicaid office in here in North Dakota. And so, and my father was a veteran within the army and then in sales in this area. So their their example to me just I think really laid the foundation. My mom was devoted to public service in her role in eligibility services, and I just really saw her love for her work in serving the people of North Dakota. And I remember early on her preparing to come to speak to our appropriations committees. And she would get, a bit nervous, but she would spend quite a bit of time preparing to speak
Mhm.
to those committees in our budget sections. And interestingly enough, that was the section in appropriations that I served on.
Oh,
And,
wow.
and so then it was kind of full circle because
Sure.
I would be sitting in my committee hearing, listening to the Medicaid director propose the budget. So just a wonderful example from my mother and
That's
my father as well.
super cool. Our parents are so powerful and impactful. My mom was a librarian,
Oh, yes,
and I always say she's one of the two reasons that I became a librarian. The
absolutely.
other one being my children's librarian, Miss Pam, who I still talk to today. And
Right.
she and my mom were super good friends as well. So fun. Are your kids in public service at all? Because you have children.
I have four children. Two are in college
Okay.
currently, and two are in the working world.
Okay.
And so none directly in public service yet, although I anticipate one of or many of them may do that in the future as they explore their careers and develop and grow. My oldest son, Jacob, is very involved and has been involved in politics in North Dakota,
Okay.
and he was instrumental in encouraging me to run as for the representative seat
Okay.
in our North Dakota House of Representatives, back in 2018. And so encouraged me to do it. He thought that, with his help, we would be able to have a great experience, and we certainly did.
Mhm.
And his experience shaped from my father-in-law, Earl Strinden, and watching him as the majority leader in the House and Earl's commitment to public service and really servant leadership, which
Mhm.
would have been Jacob's grandpa,
Sure.
shaped his view and obviously wanting to impact state government in a
Mhm.
positive way.
So strong public service on both
Both
sides
sides.
of the family.
Absolutely.
So that yet is probably pretty accurate. Not
I
there yet, but they probably will
I
get into public
anticipate that they
service.
will, yeah.
That's awesome. So what does a typical day look like if there is such a thing?
Right. Every day is so different, and I think that's one of my favorite things about the position right now. We during session, the legislature meets every other year, and so this year, we are not in session, but when we are in session, we're generally there for, 80 days between January and the end of April, typically.
Mhm.
And so when we're in session, the governor and I are in the Capitol building and very busy days from early morning to sometimes late evenings. We're in the Capitol building working on policy and really trying to understand what's happening in the various committees and impacting just policy across the governor's policy objectives. And so we're very busy as lieutenant governor during those months. I preside in the Senate as president, And that is a role that I just really, really enjoyed last session. And, I'm basically there to create a smooth operation of that chamber, as well as if there were to be a tie. We have 47 senators, and if there were to be a tie, if one was absent or if you were absent and there would be a tie vote, I would be called upon to break that tie and cast the deciding vote.
So you really need to be aware of all of the laws, and I last session, I think it was like 1,300 bills, something
Yes.
like that,
Yeah.
that were filed, and
Yeah.
I read through all of them as well as I was deciding which ones could impact libraries and who in our agency would track them. I give all the testimony on behalf of our agency generally, and then our library services director would be my backup. But we had different people who were tracking the bills because something that seems innocuous could have an impact on libraries without even thinking about it. But you
Absolutely.
have to be really aware of all the ones coming through the Senate in case you have to vote.
Absolutely. And usually I get a printout of all of the bills that will be on the floor and being discussed that day. And we have a wonderful staff that helps prepare the policy, and helps me understand what's coming forward and the governor's recommendations on those bills. So generally, before I go into session, I have a pretty good understanding of the bills that may come up and
Mhm.
be somewhat divided on the floor. And then also I know the governor's perspective
Mhm.
on that bill.
And so you served in the House as a
I
legislator,
did.
and now you preside over the Senate. What are the differences in the 2 chambers?
Oh, that's a great question. The personality of both chambers is very different. And when I was in the House chamber as a representative, I was serving there. Uh, we became it's a lively chamber. And there's a lot of conversation around different types of topics. And there's just, I think, a more relaxed in a way approach to some of the discussions. In the Senate, it seems to be a bit more
Okay.
formalized and um, a little just more. I think both chambers enjoy each other's company. You can see the friendships that have
Mm.
developed. Certainly, there's differences and there's some heated moments in both chambers.
Mhm.
But generally, it's fun to see how, at the end of the day, we all just feel very passionately about the policy that we pass for the people of North Dakota, and people, the our senators and our representatives are very passionate about passing those pieces of legislation. So that comes through a little more loudly at times in the House than in the Senate.
Sure, and I don't think you had to cast a deciding vote last session, did
I
you?
I did. There were, I
Oh, you
think,
did?
2 or
Okay.
3 tie votes. I believe there were at least 2,
Okay.
perhaps 3.
Okay.
But actually during special session, we almost had another close vote
Oh,
during a
yeah.
recent special session.
Right.
And so, yeah, it can be something that happens, and
Mhm.
so, but it's exciting.
Right.
It's
So do you have a gavel as the presider at
I
the Senate? Oh, how
absolutely.
that's gotta be
Yes,
fun.
it is.
Whew.
I was surprised how much I enjoyed being in that role as president of the
Mhm.
Senate, and of course, the time that I had in the House really prepared me for that role, I
Mhm.
feel, and so, just felt very blessed to be in that role.
Sure. And so as lieutenant governor, your position really has different functions, or like you have ceremonial, you have administrative, you have community focused parts to your role as well. And I would imagine more so in the non-session years and session, because during session, that's what we do, right? We
Yes.
live and breathe session. But
Yes.
how do you balance those different facets of your role?
Right. Well, I have a wonderful staff that helps me balance these different types of things that I'm doing. And Amber is one of my schedulers, and she just is with me many times as I'm out on the road traveling to meet constituents or have an interview just like this. Amber's
Mhm.
right here with
Yep.
me. And then I also have a chief of staff who is Maria Nessett.
Mhm.
She helps me develop policy. We do all kinds of different things. We travel to DC at times. We're doing different policy work generally related to my portfolio expertise, which is
Mhm.
in education, behavioral health, juvenile justice, and child development. Those are the primary areas that I'm involved in right now, and it has a lot to do with that's my background,
Mhm.
and literacy, of course, is something that
Mhm.
I've been working on since I've been in government in 2019 when I was first elected as
Mhm.
a representative for District 41 in Fargo.
That's great, and
Yeah,
of
and
course, literacy is a big passion of ours as well. Yeah, what were you gonna say?
I was just gonna add that in Fargo, I also have, a staff her name is Mary, both the governor and I have Mary Christie that's located in our Fargo office, and that's new to the governor's office. We've never had an office in that part of the state before, and during our last session, the governor felt strongly that, that is our most populous population
Mhm.
center in North Dakota in the Red River Valley, and we really wanted to be represented there. And so, the Senate and the House passed a bill and allowed us to open a an office located within Fargo, and so we've been able to reach out to our constituency. They've been able to come and see us there, and it's been, I think, a really great addition to the governor's office.
So do both of you spend time in the Fargo
At
office?
times, yes.
Okay.
It's not often, but
Mhm.
we're there. I was just there recently for a children's cabinet meeting, and we hosted that in the Fargo location.
Okay.
And then we met there one day for a cabinet retreat, and then we went on, basically just went out to site visits the
Mhm.
second day in the eastern part of the
You
state.
did some reading on one of those site visits, didn't you?
Absolutely. Yes, we did. We read to children. Actually, you might be referring to my visit yesterday. I was just at Dorothy Moses yesterday reading to
Oh,
children.
well, there was something in the last Team ND newsletter that
Okay.
I think had a picture of you reading to kids
Yes,
or
it's
something.
something I
That's
love to do, and I've
me
done
too.
numerous times. So that's when I get an opportunity to go into a classroom, I jump at the
I
chance.
I love that. Literacy is so important. I was in DC last week
Oh,
actually for a meeting of the state librarians group, and I met with our federal legislators, all supportive of libraries, which we're incredibly grateful for. But we actually had an opportunity to hear from the second lady, who has a literacy initiative and partners with state libraries to help promote reading over the summer to hopefully help limit that summer slide that sometimes happens where kids go backwards in their skill set.
right.
And it was a wonderful opportunity to hear from her. And we were really interested to learn from our second lady that she is getting certified in the science of reading, which I know is something you're very passionate
That's
about.
incredible.
Isn't that really
Love
cool?
that. I
Yeah,
didn't know that.
and it's simply because she has such a strong love for reading as a mom
Yes.
with her background. Of course, she has a judicial background as well, and she has just really found a passion for literacy, and so it was super cool. That might be something you can connect with her on because I know you have that passion as well.
Yes, I absolutely do. I have a son who has dyslexia,
Okay.
and I think that, has really given me the passion to really drive this policy work throughout the state of North Dakota to make sure that every child has an opportunity to learn to read.
Mhm.
And the sooner that we can engage a child in the science of reading or in
Right.
introduction to letters and sounds and literacy
Mhm.
opportunities, the better off they are. And when my son was early in his years, I understood that there was something different about the way that he learned. And I couldn't put my finger on it, even though my background is in education. I was a teacher, I was a school
Mhm.
counselor. So it felt very confusing, honestly, and I was quite helpless in trying to help him. And as I said, I was an educator, so that's quite startling to be in a position where you feel like you should be qualified to help your child in this situation and or that the teachers around him would be able to help him, but that's not what we found.
Mhm.
And so when he was in second grade, his teacher asked me to attend a dyslexia workshop because she and I both were trying to understand this learning deficit that Joseph had. And so we went to a dyslexia workshop. A new provider had come into town. There wasn't anything like this at the time in North Dakota anywhere. And we had a speech pathologist come to town to discuss this unique learning
Mhm.
difference. And so it was through that I realized and it was very emotional to understand. They just went through the characteristics of
Mhm.
dyslexia, and that was my child. And so that really led me on a journey to help him, and we ended up pulling him out of school. I was homeschooling him,
Okay.
and I did that because I needed to teach him how to read. And so when he was in 3rd grade, the middle of the year, I pulled him out of school to teach him how to read. And we went to the learning center in my area to teach him how to read, and they use structured literacy. This particular clinic used the Lindemood Bell therapy program. It's also Orton Gillingham is another
Mhm.
term people may recognize.
Sure.
So these are structured literacy programs that are multisensory and very specific, and and really that's what a child with a learning difference needs, is they
Right.
need this very unique and intensive
Mhm.
therapy at times, depending upon
Mhm.
the severity
Sure.
of the dyslexia. And so it was a wonderful opportunity. Actually, it was 4 years that Joe and I were home together. My oldest son spent some years with us actually during middle school. So, but I taught the other subject area matters, and then I would take him for this intensive
Mhm.
reading instruction, and was a wonderful time. And then at the end of 6th grade, he was like, "Mom, I want to go back to school. I am ready to learn
Thank
in my school with my friends." And so then I was able to help him transition back into the school day, and he was ready to be there and loved learning from that point on.
That's so awesome.
Mhm.
One of the changes in one of the services that we provide, we partner with the Library of Congress to provide our talking book service. And that's for individuals who can't read traditional library materials, either due to a physical, a learning, or a visual disability. So mostly people who are blind. But a few years ago, Library of Congress, through the National Library Service, added dyslexia as one of the reasons that someone could be eligible for the program, and so they receive audiobooks at no cost to them, as well as players. There's downloadable books. It's a really impactful way for someone who has difficulties reading to still be able to take in books.
Yes,
As are graphic novels. That's another great way for people who struggle with reading
yes.
and learning disabilities.
There's been so many developments over the course of the last 5 to even 10 years that have made reading more accessible to everyone. And 1 in 5
Absolutely.
children are diagnosed with dyslexia.
Mhm,
But the wonderful thing about the science of literacy
mhm.
and the science of reading is that it elevates all readers.
Yes.
And so while we have certain 20% to 25% of our readers, our learners in school are affected by dyslexia, all readers will become better the
Mhm.
sooner they're introduced to the science of reading.
Absolutely.
And so what was interesting when I first came into my role as a representative was most actually classrooms across the state of North Dakota were using a whole language approach to the teaching of reading. And this is why we saw such rapid dis- de- um, deterioration of
Mhm.
reading levels without, the proper reading instruction. And one of those programs that was implemented broadly in the state of North Dakota was called balanced literacy. And so that was something that was used for our struggling readers. Our learners would be pulled out of the classroom. They would be given literacy approach. And how I explained it to my committees when I was trying to get my legislation passed was, this would be like giving your child the wrong medicine. Your child is sick and they need help to heal from this, and you're giving them the wrong medicine. They need the right medicine, and the right medicine is structured literacy. So in 2019 I introduced legislation, and we were able to pass the legislation and develop 3 pilots across the state of North Dakota that use structured literacy approach.
Wow, and so how many is that now the, like,
That's the
adopted
standard
method
now.
statewide, the
That's the standard.
standard, that's
That's
the word that wasn't coming to my
exactly,
brain,
and
yeah.
it's in law. It's in, House or Senate Bill 1388,
Okay.
and it's the science of reading. That's the foundation. But I think the challenge that we've come to is training teachers in the science of reading is quite arduous and expensive. And also if equipping our school buildings with the proper curriculums has also been quite expensive. So it's taken time. I think we've turned a corner. I think
Mhm.
most everyone in a school building, certainly an elementary school building, has heard about the science of
Mhm.
reading. But I think the our goal now is to make sure that there's equity across the board for all of our kids across the state in that quality learning environment as
Sure.
soon as we can. Part of my legislation was an early screener so that we can catch kids in kindergarten, preferably, so that by the time they get to second and third grade, there
Mhm.
isn't this tremendous gap in reading. And that's when, of course, we know that we turn in third grade from learning to read to reading to learn. And so that's why
Mhm.
there's a real urgent time frame that we need to make sure that our kids are all
Mhm.
exposed to that really good quality education and in teaching of reading.
So literacy was a passion and a priority when you were in the House. What are your priorities as lieutenant governor?
Yeah, well, I would say that education continues to be, as well as behavioral health, child development, and just making sure that all of our children and families across the state of North Dakota are able to grow, thrive, and live here and
Mhm.
work in North Dakota and stay in North Dakota. I'm passionate about the next generation. I have 4 kids, as we've talked about, and I love the state so much that I'm really passionate to see that all kids in no matter where they may reside, if they are in a rural area, if they're in an urban area, if they are in one of our 5 tribal nations, that all students, all kids can grow to be their strongest self. And that really starts with laying that solid foundation. So the work that I'm really focused on right now is our children's cabinet is something that we've recently brought into the governor's office. During the last session, we brought the children's cabinet into the governor's office because when we looked at children's cabinets across the country, we noticed that those that are most actionable and sustainable were ones that were located within the executive branch. It was formerly held within the Department of Health and Human Services.
Okay.
I actually chaired that committee when I think it was 2021 when I became chair. The cabinet was kind of reestablished in 2019 through legislation and then sort of housed in the Health and Human Services Department. And when I was chairing that, I realized that it seemed we could never really get our feet under us because there was so many transitions. Chair, as I was the chair, I would be moving out in 2 years and we would have other technical support systems that would change. And so we just never seemed to get our bearings. And so by moving it into the executive branch, we really feel like we can sustain the cabinet and just really execute some actionable plans that we see as issues, current issues that are coming up. And so one of the issues we have two subcabinets now working within the cabinet. One of the subcabinets is working on those early years. We know that 90% of our children's brains are developed by age 5. So that's obviously an extraordinarily important time in their lives. So really one of the subcabinets is looking at those pre-birth years. So even when our children are pre-birth, we're looking at helping our moms and dads prepare for the birth of those children and then all the way to age 5 and where they enter kindergarten. So helping them and ensuring that each of our kids are prepared for school readiness.
Okay.
And so that's one subcabinet. And the other subcabinet is working on establishing 8 regional children's coordinating cabinets or or just groups of people that deal with cross systems work. And so that each of our regions are really meeting our children and family where there may be crises and where they are entering a system of care, whether that's through our education or it's perhaps through HHS or criminal justice, and making sure that we have cross systems that are really working well together so that we sort of wrap around those children's, particularly youth with unmet complex needs.
Mhm. Could you tell us a little bit more about the children's cabinet for listeners who might not be familiar with it?
Right. Well, the children's cabinet is made up of many different s- policy area experts. We have a chair who is Michelle Axman. She's our senator who is chairing this cabinet right now. We also have many different people. We have foster care representation. We have juvenile justice
Mm,
representation on the cabinet. And we've also tribal representatives. We have two tribal representatives. Representative Jamie Davis is on our cabinet, and she is a Turtle Mountain tribal member. And so just a real broad group of experts that deal in the space in many different areas of
all legislators?
children and family. We have, I believe we have 4
Okay.
legislators, and they rotate, in and out. Right now, Senator Kathy Hogan is chairing our one sub-cabinet, but, over the course of the next few years, we're going to be having turnover,
Mhm.
significant turnover due to term limits
Right.
within the House and Senate, and so that was one of our reasonings for making sure that we have some sustainability
Sure.
and bringing that into the governor's office where we can have more an insurance that we
Mhm.
have that continuity
Sure.
going forward.
Sure. Sounds like very impactful work
I love it. It's
and
been it's
a
been really
lift,
rewarding,
a big
absolutely.
lift.
It is. It is actually. I mentioned earlier that we were on a site visit
Mhm.
last week. We had a in-person retreat with our cabinet, and that is, I think, one of the more encouraging things when we get to go out and see communities that are just hitting it out of the ballpark.
Mhm.
So there's so many strengths that are happening around the state, and I think we were able to visit some of those. And so it's inspiring, and we all get very passionate about that. And then the challenge for the cabinet is how do we make sure that all of the kids
Mhm.
and families across the state are being able to access that kind of quality childcare or reading programs or our level D facilities for children with complex unmet
Mhm.
needs, so that we can really make sure that we have a hub and spoke type of
Sure.
approach to what's going on in the state of North Dakota because we are such a rural community.
We are. And those site visits, I would imagine, are impactful. We have a governor appointed advisory council for the state library that is made up of librarians, but then we also have two at large citizens, which is so awesome to have folks not directly in the field. They bring a different viewpoint
Right.
and they advise us on our grants. They actually award the grants. We have a meeting next week for our latest state funded grant round. We received almost $200,000 in requests,
It's awesome.
and we have $150,000 to award, uh, so that we have some funds later in the biennium. But one of the things our council does at least twice a year is they meet in a local library and then they visit libraries in the area. And our council members say, like, getting out into the libraries and talking directly to the librarians. What are your unmet needs? How can the grant program support you? Last year, one of the libraries we visited was the State Hospital Library, which was so
Wow.
cool
Absolutely.
to it's such a different library and one, right? There's only one state hospital library in the state. Recently, I one of my favorite things I get to do in my job is called Librarian for a Day, where I go out and a library invites me in to visit and I learn at the local level. And recently, I spent the day with our prison librarian, Nathaniel, and I got to visit all of the Bismarck area facilities, see what the library is, and talk about some of the challenges that he has, serving the residents of those facilities and promoting literacy within that structure
Right. That is
and ways
impactful
that
work.
we can, partner and support those that he's serving.
Exactly. That
And
is so
Oh,
exciting.
the site visits
Love
are
that.
I love when I get invited to a library. We have a brand new library in North Dakota, a new public library opened in Halliday, North Dakota in September, I think it was, in the fall.
How exciting.
Small community, right? Halliday is, I think,
Exactly.
2 or 300 people.
Yes.
But it's in the school. So their school closed and the community is trying to come up with ways to repurpose that building.
Right.
And so the library is actually where the school library was. Which is on the one hand awesome, but on the other hand, like, she's already bumping up on space limits,
Yes.
and she's only been open for a minute and a half. But also in that building are, I think, 3 former classrooms that have become the community fitness center, and community members can go and work out,
That is
for
so
a small
awesome to
membership
hear. I would
fee.
love to visit them.
We can work with your
Let's do that.
scheduler to
Let's get
do
out to
that.
take a look
Yeah.
at that.
Yeah, and then they have another they renovated their kitchen, cafeteria,
Mhm.
and a local caterer is utilizing it. So they have local business
Right.
partnering with the library, partnering with this fitness center, and they're trying to come up with other uses for the space as well. And to me, that showcases why I love my adopted home state. North Dakotans are just so full of ideas, and they just rethink something as simple as how do we use an empty school building, but
Exactly.
so impactful.
So impactful, and that's what we really do need to do, and I think North Dakotans are wonderful at doing that because we do have challenges. There are challenges when we have a school that consolidates with another school
Right.
building, and that happens because our sometimes our numbers just don't allow for a school building to be there. But having something like they do now in Holiday,
Mhm.
what a blessing for those community members. And we see some of this. I've seen some of this as we've been out on different sites in different areas where a community center is established to increase
Mhm.
well-being among our citizens and
Mhm.
especially in those areas that are really underserved. And so that is fantastic. I can't wait
Yeah.
to go out. We'll make a note and maybe make a visit out.
Yeah, I know she'd be thrilled to show you around. Tioga Public Library is another one. There's a community center, and the library is within the middle of the community center, and they partner with the community center on programs and services,
That's perfect.
which is wonderful. That's something our libraries do really well, as do other entities in North Dakota, because we have to partner together.
We
We have
do.
to collaborate,
Absolutely.
especially in those rural areas.
Yes, exactly. And you also see in some of the rural areas how our public and our private sectors are coming together, and I'm sure that's the case in
Mhm.
Tioga, and, different parts of North Dakota where we're trying really to encourage those partnerships
Mhm.
because, you know, honestly, state government can't do it all. We
Right,
simply can't, and
right.
so, there's a limit to our resources, and so
Mhm.
how do we connect people in a way that's going to benefit our communities, and there's just so many examples of how that's working beautifully across the state.
Absolutely, absolutely. Where can our listeners find more information about the governor's office?
Well, we have a wonderful website with all kinds of information, and it that you can find at www.governor.nd.gov. And you can also go to northdakotaresponse.gov in terms of in if there's ever a case of emergencies.
Mm.
That's a great response site. And then also the governor and I are on all your socials. So you can
Mhm,
find us on Twitter, on X, or on Facebook as well. So
mhm.
we have wonderful communications team that tries to get our and I think does a fantastic job of getting us out to hopefully so that our citizens can see
Mhm.
what we're up to.
Yeah, I think you are both very approachable and very easy to connect with, and that's I grew up in Illinois, a very different state than North Dakota for many, many reasons. And when I accepted my position, I've told this story so many times, but I had been in my position about 6 months. And our former assistant state librarian, when she retired in 21, she had been with us for 43 years. But I started in 2014, and she said, "We should start talking about your testimony." And I said, "My testimony for what?" And she said, "Well, for the legislature." I was like, "What are you talking about?" Because I didn't know that was part of my job.
Right.
Have you had surprises in the position of lieutenant governor that you were like, "Oh, I didn't know I'd be doing that?"
Oh, goodness. Yeah, there's all kinds of surprises. I think, one of I think a pleasant surprise has just been being able to get into the communities that we've just talked about
Mhm.
and really see firsthand what we do in policy at the Capitol, how it impacts our kids and our
Absolutely.
citizens, and really seeing just the um, the outcomes of the policy that we work so hard. We think and hope that they're going to succeed out there in
Mhm.
the state, but then when you get to meet the people and see how it has indeed
Mhm.
impacted them, it's just incredibly rewarding.
Mhm. Lieutenant Governor, is there any final message you'd like to share with the folks that are listening to this podcast?
Oh, I would just encourage people to invite us to visit. As we talked about, both the governor and I love to meet
Mhm.
our our citizens, our residents across the state. And so reach out to the governor's office, invite us to come and stay informed too. I think one of the things that is, I think, exceptional about the state of North Dakota is how accessible our government is to you as a citizen. We can be we're broadband is very strong in in the state of North Dakota, which is not the case in many rural states. And so you can hop on northdakotalegis.gov and you can watch any one of our legislative committee's hearings. You can see testimony. You can go back on a calendar. And I wanted to, I want to see the last education committee, and they had something that I'm interested in. Well, you can go on the calendar and click on that. So every policy initiative that we're discussing within the Capitol is accessible to the entire state of North Dakota.
As
So
well as submit testimony as a citizen.
absolutely.
That was completely new to me when I
Do
moved
it
here.
recently as just a result of all of our technological advancements. Now we can have people testifying from anywhere in the world,
Right.
which is quite amazing. We of course would love to invite you to the state capitol. And I love to see, especially during session, I love it when children and people come to visit us within and see testify on policy bills they feel passionate about, but then just see the whole process in work. And so I really would encourage people to visit us, and then also for them to reach out and invite us to visit them.
And they can do that from the website you referenced.
Absolutely,
It's right there on the
it
website.
is.
I
Yes.
love that. So, Lieutenant Governor, it has been so wonderful talking to you and learning about your passion for serving and your initiatives. I always like to end by asking for a book recommendation. I don't ask people for their favorite book because it'd be kind of like saying, which is your favorite kid? Even if you have one, you don't want to admit it. But what is a book you've read that you enjoyed and you'd love everyone to know about?
Right, that's a wonderful question, and like you say, that's very difficult to answer. I would say my all-time favorite book, even though you'd
That's
addressed that
okay
question,
if you have one.
is the Bible. The Bible is something that has been obviously it's something I've been exposed to my whole life. I couldn't live without. So, but I think personally, a book that impacted me in my growth as a Christian is Mere Christianity and C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis is one of my favorite authors. He's stretched my thinking
Okay.
and laid a foundation for just the foundational principles of Christianity. So my faith is something that's very central to me. And one of the famous quotes out of Mere Christianity that you've probably heard is integrity is doing the right thing even when no one is watching. Yeah.
Yes.
So a fantastic book. I would recommend it to any of my older readers. Younger readers, I would love to encourage them to find the book called The Trumpet of the Swan by E.B. White.
Yes.
Yes, and that was one of I mentioned I homeschooled, and it was one of the chapter books that my son loved me reading
Okay.
to him, and it was one of my favorite books to read as well. And it's a story about a trumpeter swan, and we all are familiar with trumpeter swans here in North Dakota. And his name was Lewis, and he couldn't trumpet. And so the story really is about he met a little boy named Sam who taught him how to write and then taught him how to use a trumpet to communicate. And so it really taught him how to find his voice and how each of our voices are unique and important. And so really that perseverance story, it's a beautiful
Beautiful.
story and so entertaining.
And as so many of E.B. White's books are, it's about finding your voice and
Yeah,
being true to who you are as a person. And
absolutely.
I love that you shared faith-centered books because that means you're being true to who you are as a person, and that's really beautiful when we do that.
Yeah.
So, Lieutenant Governor, thank you so much for joining us. I learned so much about you and about the governor's office and the initiatives. For those of you who listen, thank you for listening. And until next time, happy reading.
Thank you. I've learned so much from you as well, Mary.
Thank you.